up, guys? It's Josh from Chicago Johnny's here. I'm doing an official cookbook release. There's a link on my TikTok and my Facebook pages. You can order a print on demand through Amazon. You can go on my website. You can download a PDF copy, $5. This is the paperback version from Amazon. I haven't gotten the hardcover versions yet. It's full color. Kind of like a step-by-step how to make Chicago-style pizzas. Thin crust, deep dish stuff, and whatnot. I think there's about 15 recipes. And today, I made a couple already, so I'm running late, way late. I'm ill-prepared. So we did Uncle Pepper's Crispy Chicago Dough, which brings me to one of my news releases. Going to start a video podcast, kind of like David Chang did with Dinner Time Live, or does. Have a guest or two, just cook and chat. 45 minutes, hour and a half, whatever it takes, whatever the dish is. Not a tech person, so this might take a while. If any of you have tech experience, you can email me, chicagojohnnies@gmail.com. Maybe we can get connected. Imagine most of the people that are watching this I already know. But I'm going to call it Growing Peppers, and it's going to be just me cooking for people and having stories, people that have some kind of influence in my life, or that I've known for some time, or maybe I've just met. But just talking back and forth, see how I've grown as a person, or have not grown. Memories, stories, ideas, stuff like that. Uncle Peppers is what my nephew calls me, Uncle Pepper, so as a personality, I feel like Uncle Pepper fits. I love peppers, sweet peppers, mild peppers, hot sauces. I get no affiliation for this, but right now I'm hooked on this African ghost pepper sauce. This stuff is at Jewel. You can get it at Jewel along with my Jared Mayer and barbecue sauce. All Jewel Lasco stores should have it. This stuff's like $4 or $5. I forget what it is. Very hot, but it has some really in-depth flavor. This is probably my third bottle in the past 2 months. I love this stuff. So if you're a pepper freak, get this stuff. And then the other thing I've been addicted to is this Melinda's Ghost Pepper Sauce. Actually, Melinda's in general, they have a ton of sauces, but they're pretty significant. I haven't really come across a bad Melinda's product yet. So whoever is running Melinda's and making these products, congratulations. It's fantastic. So, look for Growing Peppers. It's going to be a video podcast, cooking with a couple of guests. I still have to figure out schedule and all that stuff. I'm a fly by the seat of your pants kind of guy, and that's what I'm going to be doing. So, was it 2 days ago? Today's Friday, so Wednesday I made this dough, left it out for about 6 hours, knocked it down, put it in the fridge. I also made another recipe in here, which is atypical for Chicago-style pizza, but it's what I started making at the same time about 10, 12 years ago when I was incorporating semolina and whole wheat in a lot of the stuff that I was making, mostly whole wheat at the time. And it took a very long time to figure out the ratios of how much semolina and wheat flour you can use, whole wheat flour, to come up with a good pizza that stayed crispy. So I finally did that. This one, I don't recommend making the same day ever. I would at least let it sit for a day to hydrate the flours. Semolina takes a while to absorb the hydration. So this one I definitely wouldn't do the same day. This one you can do in the morning, leave it out on the counter, knock it down, 6 hours, knock it down again after a couple hours, and then you can roll it out and use it. If you're going to do it the same day, I would suggest using bread flour for it, so it's a little more structured. That's what I did today. So I have Uncle Pepper's Crispy Chicago Dough. This is one batch. It's like 220 grams, I believe. 214 grams. We'll roll it out, we'll trim it, and we'll bake it. This one I used half beer, half water, and I used lard as the fat, and then I used bread flour. You can see. So this one sat for 6 hours, knocked it down, put it in the fridge, 2 days. Took it out this morning, 3 hours ago. It's got some good smell coming from it. 3 or 4 days is what I prefer on a crust like this. You can go up to a week, you can go a little longer if you want to. The longer it's in there, the more funk it gets, almost like a cheese, like a Romano sharp cheese. I feel like at some point, once it tips over the edge, if you're doing a very basic pizza, like a cheese pizza, or like cheese and pepper or something like that, that's fine. When you start loading it up, I feel like it's competing flavors. When it's too strong of a dough, too strong of a crust flavor with a lot of toppings. No, you can't have this. You can see this one turns smooth. When you first make this dough recipe, I usually use a paddle because it's very dry. I put all my hydrations in here, so 43.57% hydration. If you're a pizza maker, you know it's very low. So it doesn't come together so almost like when you're making pie crust or shortbread cookies. So I usually start with the paddle, get everything to come together a little bit. It looks like it's very shaggy, little balls. Doesn't really come together well. Take the paddle out, let it sit 3, 4, 5 minutes, then switch over the hook, and then it will come together. If you need to, you can take some ice water and you kind of flick it in like you would with making pie crust. This will help get it to come together. But this one, since I only left it in for 3 days, which is good, I use beer, half water. Just gives a little bit of a start to the funk, but it's still very mellow. And then I use lard, because lard, bacon fat, and refined coconut oil seem to be the 3 crispest crusts at Crisco, but I don't really like using Crisco, or shortening, I guess they call it. And since there's a lot going on here, I didn't need to use a heavy, like a corn oil or butter, again, because it's just putting too much into it, going over the top with it. And with pizza, I feel like you be conscious of your toppings when you're picking your crusts. Speaking of, so that was Uncle Pepper's crispy Chicago dough. I also made the semolina whole wheat flour crust. This one's 53.57% hydration, so it's a little more hydrated, but it needs it because of the semolina to really hydrate the semolina. So this one starts out, you'll do water, yeast, semolina flour, and whole wheat flour, and then you let it sit. This one I let sit about 6 hours to try and really hydrate the whole wheat and the semolina, because it'll just take a little while to absorb the hydration. Then I take that, I add the water, I mix it into like a slurry, and then I add the other ingredients, which it's basically just fat and flour and water at that point. So you add the water, you get like a slurry. Then you add your fat, and this one I used lard as well. And then your salt, and then your flour. Then you knead it. Once it comes together, you knead about 3 to 5 minutes. You can go longer if you want. The longer you go, the more likely you are to build up too much gluten, and your, especially the thin crust, dough is going to shrink up as it bakes. So 3 to 5 minutes I found. And a KitchenAid on low to be setting. It'd be number 2, but it's the first setting. That's my ideal, but you'll find yours. And like I said in the beginning of this book, write in it, take notes, change it the way you want it. If you are very new to this, and this dough in particular is very low hydration, either use a dough that's more hydration for a recipe, or add a little bit more liquid to it. It will make it easier for you to work with until you get used to it. Kind of like making sourdough. If anybody out there has made sourdough, it's a very wet dough. And at first, you just mess up, and then all of a sudden you get it. And then once you get it, you're like, how did I not get it before, you know? That's kind of what this is like. So for both of these doughs, this morning, probably about 9, I rolled out a 12-inch crust and docked them. And this is called curing the crust, or cured crust. So roll it out, trim it, dock it, put it on a parchment that I oiled, and then for the semolina wheat flour pizza, I use semolina flour to keep it from sticking. For the other one, I use breadcrumb because it's a flour base. So when I'm doing pizza, I try to use like stuff that wouldn't compete with it. So if I'm using breadcrumbs in the semolina crust or cornmeal will be okay. But if I'm using breadcrumbs, I feel like it's a competing flavor. So this one's all flour, white flour, red flour. So the breadcrumbs don't take anything away from it. This one, the semolina, adds a little bit of flavor, a little bit of texture because it doesn't really break down or absorb hydration. So when you throw it on the stone, you still get a little bit of that, like similar to cornmeal. If you ever use cornmeal on the bottom of your pizzas, you get a little bit of that resistance, that bite. And so that's what I was going for. So, well, why don't we start out with these, because then I can flour the surface and go from there. These are already rolled out. So we'll start here. Why don't we start with the semolina crust? So let's talk about flavor combinations before and crusts and how they influence the toppings that I'm doing. So I sliced some tomatoes earlier today, put a paper towel in the bottom of a bowl and left it covered in the fridge. The paper towel is going to absorb some of that moisture because, again, with Chicago thin crust specifically, we like the crispy crust, and the more hydration, the more wet stuff you're putting on your pizza, the less crispy you're going to get it. And since I'm using tomatoes, I wanted to get some of the hydration out of there because they are very wet, obviously. I'm using sauteed spinach. So this, I put some butter in a pot, 1.5 bags of spinach, some granulated garlic and some salt, and then after it started to break down for a touch, I added some white wine, which I usually use Chardonnay or Pinot Grigio, and today I use Pinot Grigio. When I'm using white wines for cooking, those are my two go-tos. Cook it down, and then in this case, you can see how the stems are still really nice and bright. I slid it all over to the side and then reduced that wine and butter mixture until it was almost gone. And then I turned the heat off and mixed it all together, and this absorbs some of that butter and wine, and you can see there's not a lot on the bottom. Some, but not a lot. So that's a very wet ingredient as well. And then normally with this combination, I like to use raw garlic, either sliced or through a press. And then flick it on there. Just pick up, flick it, get it on there. Those three ingredients, fantastic, especially if you're doing like a vegetarian style pizza. Today, instead of the raw garlic, I'm going to use a little bit of this prosciutto that I have left over because waste not, want not, right? So the prosciutto is salty, it's aged, this crust is earthy, spinach is earthy, and then the tomatoes are just, they're a little earthy. I don't know how to describe those, I guess, but the tomatoes are going to be the, I don't know how to describe it, like a more familiarity thing to this pizza, right? There's going to be roasted tomatoes, basically, on top. And it's going to taste familiar. I guess that's the only way to say it. Alright, so let's start here. This is the semolina crust, so I'll use semolina on my peel. If you are new to making pizzas, the wooden peel, actually even if you're not, I prefer a wooden peel over a metal peel because the wood is a little bit porous, so if there's any moisture, it can wick a little bit of that away, and then you still get movement on your peel, where when you're using a steel peel, or if you roll out your dough on the counter and you don't move it for a little while, there's nowhere for that moisture that's being released from the dough to escape to, so it creates like a suction and sticks, and then you can't get your crust out. Just don't do it. So I like the wooden peel. You could dust your peel with semolina, cornmeal, flour, breadcrumbs. For this one in particular, I'm using semolina because it's semolina dough. And then it's very fine semolina, but it won't absorb a lot of that moisture, the hydration. So it'll still give a little bit of resistance as I'm biting into it. Rolled out the semolina whole wheat crust, docked it, put in a sprayed parchment with oil, put some semolina on it, so it's not sticking. Let it sit out for like 5 or 6 hours now. When you let it sit out, don't leave a fan on. Actually, I have this fan off. It's hot in here, but I'll turn it on when I get done with this. The fan will dry out the edges too fast. It'll curl up, and it will be useless. So this is my exposed side. It's drier than the other side, obviously. And that is what I'm going to put layered down. And then the reason we cure crusts sometimes is it's just crisp factor is the only reason. You get it real thin, right, because I'm not topping it right away, so I can roll it out real thin. And then you cure it, and it's releasing some of that hydration already. But it's still flexible. It's not dry, which is important. If it's dry, it cracks when you do this. You went too far, throw it out. Start over. Jimmy Bread, are you on there? I can't see any comments. So. Alright, so wooden peel, dusted, cured crust. Cured crusts, they move very easily. It's hard to get those to stick. So you have a lot of time to play with these ones. Give it a shake every now and again, make sure it keeps moving. I need to get a new pizza seasoning. Let me see if I opened it. It did. So, my cookbook is called the Chicago Pizza Cookbook. I did it under my name, Josh Downey, but I own a company called Chicago Johnny's, where we make olive oil jardiniere, cherry bourbon barbecue sauce, and both those products you can find at, I think, all Jewel Osco locations, if you're local, Amazon, Walmart, my website, chicagojohnny's.com. One of my best-selling products is Perfect Pizza Seasoning, and this I put on top of all of my pizzas. Alright, cured semolina crust. Simply crushed tomatoes, and I do some notes about this in the book, but if you're looking to spend on ingredients, I feel like tomatoes is definitely a place to spend. These I had left over from experiments. Di Fratelli, I do enjoy them. Stanislaus ground tomatoes are fantastic. 7-Eleven ground. Most of the domestic tomatoes are actually really good. Maybe even some of the best. The Stanislaus ground might be the best I've found for this. They're bright. And as you'll see, I don't really doctor this up much because I like the tomatoes to speak for themselves. So it's not like a Sicilian sauce where you cook it down with garlic and oregano and basil and onion and stuff like that. I like the sauce to speak for itself. So since this was a very thin crust, I went a little light on the tomatoes. It's probably like 60-65 grams. If this was a regular pizza I was rolling out, I'd be at 85 to 100. But this is very thin. It's only going to be in the oven for, this one's probably 8 minutes. 500 degrees. All my thin crusts, I do a sharp, well, most of them, I'll do a sharp cheese. This is Romano. This is for the dog. So it's like 12 to 15 grams of Romano. You could use Parmesan if you want. I prefer Romano. It's sharper. It melts better, so it'll release some of the fat and the salt, which I really do like. Speaking of prosciutto, I put prosciutto under my mozzarella And the reason I do that, it renders better. It won't get so dry, but it will render some of that aged fat and salt out into the sauce. And with this semolina crust, it's just a really good combination. So here's one slice of prosciutto. Usually break it in thirds, kind of ball it up. Kind of like you're doing raw Italian sausage, I guess. Disperse it fairly evenly. So this prosciutto I opened the other day, left it in the fridge. It's particularly wet when you first open it. So I will usually open it the day before I want it, leave it in the fridge and let it dry out a little bit. And if you do it long enough, you get these edges that are real dried out. It's salty, like you can almost feel the salt crystals on it. I love that. If you are just joining me, some of the news that I had to release today is that I'm going to be starting a video podcast where I'm going to cook for guests while we chat about life. I'm going to call it Growing Peppers. So look for the Growing Peppers video podcast. I am not a tech person, so I'm going to source some help for that. And it might take a little while to figure it out. But we used to do a lot of catering and festivals, and ran a hot dog cart and a Cajun tent, food tent. And I do miss cooking, and so I want to get back in the kitchen a little bit more. There's not going to be a theme to it. It's not peppers, it's not Chicago style, whatever. It's just dishes I want to try out. There's so many things I haven't even tried or made, so kind of looking forward to getting my nose back to the grindstone. Every now and again, shake your pizza on the peel, make sure it's loose. In the book, I go through the toppings and what you would put under cheese and what you put on top of the cheese. Prosciutto, I like under the cheese. Depending on who you're going to talk to, there's very little right and wrong with pizza making, right? Like, I'm cooking this for me. I'm going to make it the way that I want it, the way that I feel like it comes out best. So I put the prosciutto under the cheese because I like that salt and that aged fat to render out. So we have crushed tomatoes, pecorino romano, prosciutto, and then we're just going to do whole milk mozzarella. This is low moisture whole milk mozzarella. You definitely want low moisture, no matter what you do. Depending on what part of the country you're in, you could probably only find part skim. I have some customers that have told me the only low moisture whole milk mozzarella they can get is string cheese. So they take string cheese and they run it through a grater. I imagine it's the same cheese, it's just shaped differently. Alright, so this might be a little bit more cheese than you'd want on a cured crust like this, but I will go with it. And then I put some of my perfect pizza seasoning on there. You can get it at chicagojohnnies.com, Amazon, Walmart. Caught a red pepper flake. And then wet ingredients on top of the cheese. So this is the sauteed spinach. And the reason these go on top of the cheese is we want the dry heat of the oven to kind of pull some of this liquid out of the spinach. And the tomatoes. when you're making the spinach, I always saute it with some butter, some wine, salt, sometimes some garlic. Put some garlic in this one because I wasn't using the raw garlic on the pizza. The longer you go, the darker it's going to get, the more it's going to look like seaweed. If you can more steam it, keep it off the direct heat as long as you can, you'll get some of this bright green, which is good. And then it's also going to cook in the oven, which is going to darken it some more. So the less heat you can put to the spinach, the better. And then these are just some Roma tomatoes I ran over, sorry, not Roma. I got tomatoes on the vine from Mighty Vine. Jewel had some Mighty Vine tomatoes on sale. So, Mighty Vine is a Chicago company, I believe, grown in greenhouses. They make a fine product. Doesn't travel far. Quick note, if you're using an end piece, flip it so the skin is down. I'm not going to use this, but you flip it so the skin is down. Skin up doesn't allow that moisture to release as well, and it's a pain in the butt. So let me wash my hands. And we have the oven set to 500 degrees. I have a stone on the lowest rack possible. And then I also have a second stone, one rack below the top, because on some pizzas when you really load them, maybe I want some top heat at the end to finish them off and really brown the cheese, you know? Or this one might need it too because of all the wet. So I'll start at the bottom stone, see how it's going, and if I need to, I can move it up to the top for a minute or so, and that will really help the top to cook. So I normally set the timer for 8 minutes. But we're going to do 7 minutes because we're going to check on it. And if I need to put it on top, I can put it on top. When I leave it on the bottom stone, I can leave it there for another minute, no big deal. So again, if you're just joining, I'm going to be starting a video podcast called Growing Peppers with people that have influenced my life, or maybe I've just met and I work with. Basically just shoot the shit, you know, while I cook for them. So that was the semolina whole wheat crust. That's why I did the sauteed spinach, tomato, and the prosciutto. I really love that combination on that crust. And it's cured, that one was. So this is Uncle Pepper's Crispy Chicago Dough. So this is a more of a basic go-to if you're familiar with Chicago thin crust pizzas. It's very low hydration. Sometimes it can be kind of hard to work with. So if you're new to the pizza game, Chicago pizza game, I would suggest either using a higher hydration dough or go a little wetter with it at first until you get the feel of it. Some breadcrumbs. I'm going to dust our wooden peel with some breadcrumbs. These are just some Toronto that I let go stale, baked off, and ran through a grinder. Or not a grinder, sorry, a food processor. And then we have one more cured crust here we'll do. And then we'll get to the raw dough. So again, this sat out for about 5 hours. This side is the cured side. It dried out, it lost some of the hydration. We're going to flip it. And then this is going to be the bottom. Or the bottom becomes the top, top becomes the bottom. This is the drier side, so again, it's still pliable, it's not cracking, it's perfect. Drier side underneath, that's what's going to touch the stone. Crushed tomatoes. I go a little bit light on this because it's a very thin dough. So the semolina was only 164 grams for a 12-inch pizza. This one I think is about 205. but you're going to hear how crisp these come out because you form a skin, you cure it, you form a skin on it, you release some of the hydration before you get to the baking process. This is just a technique. You can do this with any recipe. Well, most recipes, I guess. Alright. Crushed some Romano. Kind of clean off the peel as you go, because anything that's on this peel that goes in the oven that's not essential to making the pizza, it's just going to burn off. So the less I can get into the oven, the less likely I am to have like smoke. Which reminds me, turn on the vent fan. And I can turn on my fan now that the cured crusts are sauced. If you're curing a crust and you leave it under a fan, it's going to bubble up, curl up, and it's going to be useless, so you don't want to do that. Alright, so Uncle Pepper's crispy Chicago dough, crushed tomatoes, Romano, and then we'll do a classic sausage pepper onion combination. Very, very classic Chicago. Sometimes there's mushrooms in it. Some kind of variation, but I guess in New Orleans they have the holy trinity of cooking with the bell pepper, onion, and celery. In Chicago, the pizza holy trinity is Italian sausage, bell pepper, and onion. And the sausage I always like under the cheese. We're in the oven long enough that it will cook raw sausage as long as the pieces are small enough. So I like to keep it underneath so it renders some of the fat again, kind of like the prosciutto does, but also it won't dry out. If you put it on the top, it can dry out, which, if you like that texture, is fine. That's a little charred and whatnot, totally fine. So it's Italian sausage raw, so I'm going to wash my hands. Every now and again, give it a shake, make sure you're not sticking. With these cured crusts, it's not as important because it's very hard to get them to stick. Not very hard, but it's a lot harder. The raw dough ones we'll do next. When you roll those out, you definitely need to keep shaking them because that is just releasing moisture the whole time. Wooden peel, I always use a wooden peel for launching into the oven. It's got a little bit, it's porous, so it will take in some of that moisture, whereas steel or aluminum peel, there's nowhere for the moisture to go. So it sits there, and then it wets the dough, and then the dough sticks to the peel. So I use the thin metal one to pull out of the oven. Speaking of, the timer just went off at 7 minutes. Oh, that looks good. And I am going to switch to the top, because there's a lot of steam coming off. Go 1 minute. I only have a minute left, so we'll go with our cheese. And this is just mozzarella. I don't have any provolone. With this combination, I do like a 50-50 deli provolone, not smoked, not the real sharp stuff, but deli provolone mixed with low moisture whole milk mozzarella. But again, I don't have provolone. So. Nothing wrong with this. Some of Chicago Johnny's Perfect Pizza seasoning. And then these are some bell peppers I ran through the mandolin this morning and threw them in a container with a paper towel. What that does is it helps some of the moisture to get absorbed, because with Chicago thin crust pizza, you don't want a lot of moisture in your toppings. We'll do another 30 seconds. We're going to end up at 9.5 minutes for that one. The oven, usually I'm at 8 minutes. And I think what happened is that I got home a little late, and the oven only heated up for about 45 minutes. If you are heating up your oven, a stone in there, you want it for an hour, maybe even longer. Oh yeah. So through the mandolin was the tomatoes, which I did last. Onion and bell pepper. Alright, let's get this out of here. Oh, yeah. So this was the whole wheat semolina crust, cured. Now this crust always shrinks a little bit. I'll show you. I was at 12 inches when I made it. I lost about a ½ inch all the way around. For whatever reason, I never looked into the science of it, but this recipe will always shrink back a little bit, no matter how much you let it relax, and what your kneading time is, it'll always shrink. But this recipe in particular has gorgeous flavors to it. So you get some of the earthiness, some of those darker flavors from the whole wheat flour, some resistance from the semolina flour, and because it cured it, this one's going to be incredibly crispy. And then I use bread flour because there's not a whole lot of gluten structure happening in those two flours. But the whole wheat flour, the spinach, the semolina, and the tomatoes are a wonderful earthy combination. Sometimes instead of the prosciutto, if I'm doing a vegetarian pizza, I'll just do raw garlic, run it through a press, and then just pick it up and kind of flick it in there. Also, beautiful pizza. This looks fucking good. You can see how thin it is maybe here, let's see. See how thin that is? So this one in particular is 165 grams, I think 165 grams? 164 grams of dough for a 12-inch pizza. It's thin. I could consider that ultra thin if I was doing a regular pizza. On a cured crust, that's about as thin as you want to go no matter what you're doing. You don't want to go much thinner than that. If you have not already gotten, if you're going to start making pizzas, this was the best $10 I ever spent in the pizza made in the world. Makes it so much easier to cut, it's easier on the wrists. I used to take a chef's knife or this kind of knife and then you gotta turn it, then you gotta turn it, you know. This makes very easy work with it. I have a little bit of black garlic here left. I'm going to do that on the wheat flour one next one. Oh god, this smells good. So you can see the prosciutto that is exposed dries out a little bit. Still great, I love it. It's got more of a chew to it, like you're eating jerky. But all that salt and fat that was in here is now somewhere in this sauce, right? So all those little pieces that we put in there rendered out some of that unctuous fat, that aged fat flavor. And that's what I love about prosciutto on pizza. Salami on pizza is the same way. Put salami underneath. Let it render out some of that fat. What do you guys say? You want to cut this? Are you guys ready for this? I can hear it. I don't know if you can hear it. And then with this cured crust in particular, we'll do one that's not cured here in a little bit. You can see how flaky it gets. Real little cracker crumbs come off of there. And then on the bottom, I don't know if you're going to be able to see it. There's real tiny air bubbles. If you're making sourdough, you get those big blisters. This one gets real tiny bubbles because it's a drier crust. But that is where a lot of this crisp comes in. And you can see how strong it is. Look at this is loaded. It's a loaded piece of pizza. And I'm holding it up like cider. It's heavy. Corner first. It smells fucking great. I have zero complaints about this pizza. My combination of the semolina, the texture, the resistance, and the earthy flavor with the whole wheat flour, the spinach, the tomatoes, prosciutto. Look at this. There's a structured pizza there. You see how thin it is too. I wonder if I got anything to compare with. It's a bench scraper. You see how thin it is. This is a goddamn gorgeous pizza. Jimmy, I know you're still open. If you're watching this, you send me a text when I get out of here. I might bring you some of this. Time you're at the shop till today. Jimmy owns Jimmy Bread on Algonquin and Square Barn Road in Algonquin. Fucking phenomenal baker. I don't know what his hours I think are till 4. So I mean, if you're in the area, turn this off and go out there. But if you're not in the area, just find a local baker. Support your local places, you know. Bringing some pizza to Michelle. Alright, so here we have the cured crust. Now, because it's on a wood peel and it's a cured crust, it should still move, and it does. If this was just rolled out, there's no way I would have left it as long as I did. I would have come back to it, it would have been stuck to the peel, and I would have been fucked. We're good now. Let me temp the stone. So, the stones that I'm using today, and that I prefer to use, are actually pieces of granite countertop. They're like 14 by 16 inches. So when I'm making pizza on them, Normally you want the stone to heat up fully in between pizzas. These are nice because I could put one on the left side, rotate it halfway through the right side, and then the exposed side is heating up again. So you don't have as much downtime with these granite stones. They're thick, they hold the heat very well, they transfer heat very well. And I mean, this is a fake countertop, but you see all the variations in the stone that they're mimicking, obviously. They all hold heat differently. And so on the bottom of your pizza, you're going to get waving textures. And one element of cooking I feel like is often overlooked is texture. Varying textures. To give you an example of a bad one, we're out in Vegas. Let me get this in the oven. So we're in Vegas. This is a texture story. We go out to eat at what's it, Hell's Kitchen, Gordon Ramsay place, and we all got something different. I forgot to get the fried chicken. It might have been me. Crispy fried chicken on a toasted bun with a piece of crispy fried chicken skin and no sauce, and it was just crisp, crisp, crisp. There was no varying textures, and the chicken's pounded kind of thin. If it was a real thick piece of chicken, then you get a little bit of tenderness from the chicken, some varying flavors. There's nothing. Oh no, that was somebody else's. I got the Hell's Kitchen burger or some shit like that. I'm eating it, I'm like, what the fuck's going on here? Lift up the top bun, they use a disher and they put it all right in the center of the hamburger. All the peppers that are just around there. So, if you don't know that, you're just eating plain hamburger all the way around till you get to the middle. So that wasn't so much a texture thing, it was just a building issue, I suppose. Building the sandwich. My brother-in-law got a foie gras burger, rare, so it was a rare pub burger with foie gras, which is kind of like mashed potatoes, on a soft potato bun that I don't think was toasted. And so it was like eating a mush sandwich. Now, just adding varying textures to any of those would have made them great dishes. But there was too much of the same in every one of the sandwiches. So texture, to me, is like another element to cooking that should really be paid attention to. That's my rant for the day. Well, one of them. So, let's do some raw dough. This is all-purpose flour. You always want to dust your countertop, your bench, whatever you want to call it. And I always keep it open on the side because you're going to use more than you think you need. We'll do the Uncle Pepper's crust first. So I'm releasing this cookbook, the Chicago Pizza Cookbook. It is available now through Amazon Printing on Demand, or you can go to chicagojohnnies.com. It's on the homepage. I worked for about 10 years learning about thin crust and deep dish pizza and how to make it and what flours lend to what traits of a pizza and how much salt is preferred. What fat types you can use. I use duck fat. I went pretty weird on it. Egg yolk. There's recipes for, if you grew up in the Chicago area, the Chicago school lunch pizza, which ironically is a big hit. Apparently very nostalgic. People miss it. This here, so this dough that I'm going to use, it starts out looking more like this. See, it looks almost like a head of cauliflower. It's very low hydration. So it will look like this until the flour starts to absorb some of that moisture. And then, look at this. It's a beautiful, smooth dough ball. And I don't actually oil my containers most of the time, depending on the outcome I want. I feel like if you oil your container, you put your dough in it, and you knock it down, you're mixing the oil, you get what I call fat spotting, where you get like dark areas. This one doesn't really have it. You get real dark areas and real light areas because it absorbs too much fat and not enough hydration or whatever. So I don't like to really oil it unless I have to. You saw this came out clean, smooth. I didn't have to oil it. The semolina one, you might want to add some fat to. So this is a dough ball. It ends up being about 214 grams. For a 12-inch pizza is about right. For a thin crust. Center out when you're rolling. Got a new rolling pin just 2 days ago, actually. The more flour you incorporate in this process, the I don't want to say drier. You want to incorporate as little flour as possible, I suppose. So once you get a good rolling out, try to keep as little flour as you can on there, while still being able to roll it out, obviously. Roll it somewhat circular shape. You can stretch it with your hands if you want to. You can see it's a strong dough because you can hold it like this. Which most pizzas, I can't think of a pizza really, but well, maybe like a pan pizza, Detroit pizza, you wouldn't really be able to do that. Well, like a New York, Jersey, St. Louis, Rockford, Neapolitan, all those would have a strong gluten structure where you'd be able to hold up the dough like that. Use your bench scraper if you got it. We gotta get some of that flour out of here. And then we have our wood peel. Because this is an all-flour dough, I would use a cornmeal if you want the texture. I would use a breadcrumb if you don't want the varying flavor of cornmeal or texture. You basically bite right through this, but it's not going to inhibit the flavors because it's flour based and you're using basically a flour dusting as well, cooked flour, I guess. This one I didn't have to trim. This is about 12 inches. I'm okay with this as is. We'll check on the one in the oven. Oh yeah. This one in the oven, I'm going to go for another 2 minutes, so that puts us at 9 minutes total for this one on the bottom rack. I didn't move this one up. I feel like it'll finish out nice the way it is. Alright, so again, this is Uncle Pepper's Crispy Chicago dough. Just crushed tomatoes, and now this is a raw dough, so it's going to be in the oven longer. I can use a little bit more crushed tomatoes, or sauce, whatever you're using, because it will be in the oven longer. With the cured crust, like we just did with the semolina whole wheat and prosciutto, sauteed spinach, and tomatoes. That one in particular, because it's only in the oven for a shorter amount of time, and we're really going for crisp and less for structured. Teaching moment. So I got some sauce off the edge, and if I leave it there, this pizza crust is going to stick when I go to slide it. So you really want to get it good and floured, and that way, even if my crust happens to come across that wet spot, it'll be fine. The flour absorbs the moisture, knock it off, you're good to go. Crushed tomatoes. Again, if you're looking on where to spend money when you're making pizzas, toppings is a good one, and tomatoes. It's probably my priority would be tomatoes. Everything else, I don't do anything with tomatoes. It's just crushed tomatoes. So I want them to be bright. I want them to be tomato flavored, right? Like that's what I want. Does that make sense? So I have a little bit of black garlic left. I'm making more in the dehydrator behind me. But I'm going to put some black garlic in this today. I'm going 30 seconds on the top stone in the oven. If you get the book, the Chicago Pizza Cookbook, available on Amazon, there is a setup diagram on how to set up your oven for thin crust pizzas and deep dish pizza. So for thin crust, I have a stone on the bottom as low as it can go on the rack. Then I have a rack one lower than the top with another stone on it. So I start here and I cook for however long I want, sometimes the whole time. But on a loaded pizza or more wet pizza, I'll transfer to the top for 30 seconds, a minute and a half. Oh, yeah. So this is the one that just come out. We gotta think this process out a little bit here. So the cured crust, so it's already loose on the or low on hydration. It's already a low hydration dough. I cured it so it's even lower hydration. So you are limited the amount of time you can put this in the oven. I put a little too much cheese and toppings on here. You can see the cheese didn't get a chance to brown because the moisture from the onions and the peppers, and maybe a little too much cheese, didn't give it enough chance to dry it out. But fucking fantastic pizza. You can see by the edges, I can't go much longer in time. I probably should have put this one up on the top for the last 2.5 minutes, something like that, to help dry it out. Still gonna be fucking great though. We'll let this one cool for a minute, and then we'll cut it. So this is our crispy Uncle Pepper's Crispy Chicago dough. It's page 30, 31 if you got the book. We rolled out the dough, we docked it. We're using 214 grams of dough, probably 85 grams of crushed tomatoes, some Romano. We'll do some black garlic. So this is dehydrated. All black garlic is take a bulb of garlic, get some of the loose paper off, especially on the top. Wrap it real tight in plastic wrap. Wrap it real tight in foil with the shiny side in, and put it in the dehydrator at 132, 135 degrees for a month. And it essentially is fermenting the garlic. It will turn black. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that. But it will turn black. And it's, if you're a roasted garlic, it's very soft. That's how it's going to be when it comes out of the dehydrator. But if you let it ferment and then you unwrap it and you put it back in the dehydrator for 2 days, you will get a very dry version of black garlic, and then you put that in a grinder, and that's all this is. It's just black garlic flavor. They might even sell this shit by now. I don't know. I don't get out much. So black garlic, if you're not familiar with it, is fermented garlic. It's not incredibly strong like garlic would be. It's a very subdued flavor profile. It's sweet. It's earthy. A little more on the dark side, where garlic would be a little bit like bright earthy. This is like dark earthy. Does that make sense to anybody? So garlic Romano. We'll do some Italian sausage. You can go a little bigger on these pieces if you want to, because this is a raw dough. We're going to have this in the oven for probably 13 or 14 minutes, where the cured crust that we just made, that one was only in the oven for it was like 8.5 minutes or so, because it's much lower hydration. This one, we have to get the hydration out from inside the dough, so it's in there a longer time. So I'll go a little heavier on the cheese. I went a little heavier on the sauce. You can go heavier on the sausage. I'm not, because I don't want to open another pack of sausage. I don't have to right now, you know. So funny story, I was in culinary school. Well, let me go wash my hands. So I went to culinary school as like an exchange program in high school. So the first half of your day you go to community college out in the area, and then you can pick a specialty. If you want to do like IT, tech, mechanics. I went to culinary program. I did it for a year. I didn't learn like a ton. But we're peeling carrots, julienning them. We're weighing it out. And I'm like, what are we doing? We're counting costs. And at the time, I'm like, okay, this dish we're making is probably $14. This is the late 90s. It's probably $14, and you're wanting me to save 7 cents in carrots. Like, it didn't make sense to me. We did this for celery, proteins, everything. And it was less about the cost-saving effect and more about waste not, want not. And so that's one thing that gets drilled into you early on in the process. And it's a very good thing to get drilled into you. It sounded weird. Waste not, want not. I've adapted my cooking style a lot of the ways to use what I have on hand, or if it's going to go bad. And quite frankly, you almost feel a little more at peace when you do stuff like that. You ever talk to bakers, and they're generally very peaceful people. There's something beautiful about making breads and making doughs and putting the time in and hand processing things. And so it's generally very peaceful. You feel more grounded when you're doing stuff like that. That's what this is all about. So it's not about saving 13 cents in carrots in this story that I'm telling. It's about the waste not, want not, right? Like, use what you have. Okay, so the first piece I did was only in the oven for like 8 minutes. So I put the toppings on top, the peppers and onions. This one I'm going to put them underneath so you can see the difference. This is going to be in the oven a lot longer. There's probably some people on like Chicago Pizza groups swearing at me right now. You put the fucking onions on top of the pizza. Whatever. Do what you want. You got one shot at life. Live it the way you want. I'm making these pizzas for me and Michelle, so do them the way I want. So this is going to spend more time in the oven, that's all I'm saying. So it'll give more time for this little bit of moisture to come out. And then, did you see how the cheese in the other one, which we're going to cut here in a minute, didn't brown fully? And that was because the short cooking time and the moisture coming off of the vegetables. And I cut these this morning. Ideally, you'd want to cut these the day before to allow some more of that moisture to get released. I fell behind this week and I did not. Where's I going with that? So it would be in these containers overnight at least, and so you can see some of the moisture on the side there. That moisture is going to get absorbed by the paper towel at the bottom, the longer it sits in there. So because I cut these this morning, They're a little wetter than they normally would be. But, like most things in cooking, you can adapt a little bit. So go a little longer, go a little lighter on the cheese than maybe you wanted to. There's things you can do to play with it that you just kind of instinctively get the longer that you're making stuff. So this is Perfect Pizza Seasoning, available on Amazon, ChicagoJohnny's.com, Walmart, Etsy. It's one of my best sellers. Basically, it's when you walk into a pizza joint, and you smell that burnt flour, and then you smell the oregano, some of the sauce flavors coming out, like onion, garlic, and then I add a little bit of crushed red pepper because I grew up with crushed red pepper. It's crushed red pepper free. I eat the shit out of it. So there's a little crushed red pepper in there for like that. You're not gonna think of it this way, but crushed red pepper has a lot of sweetness in it. So that, to me, it's very addicting. It's sweet and spicy. So that's what I'm going with there. We'll give this a shake, make sure we're still loose. We are. On that note, real quick, so I'm using the wood peel, which I highly recommend. And then if you're new to the game, breadcrumbs seem to give me the longest amount of time to leave it before it sticks. Flour is probably the least amount of time, then semolina, and then cornmeal, and then breadcrumbs. So you're very early on in the process. Just stick with breadcrumbs until you figure it out, and then go to something healthier. Alright, so this is our cured crust. This is Uncle Pepper's crispy thin crust dough. We baked it about 8.5 minutes. Look at the color on this. This is darker than this for two reasons. This was close to the side of the oven when I was finishing up. You can see the onion dried out a little bit more. So be conscious of that. I love this, so I'm totally fine with that. But also, you can see it's got a sheen to it. Some of the fat from the sausage and the cheese got on there, and that gives it a nice sheen. Oh my goodness. Can you hear that? Can you hear that? God damn. Alright, so this is a cured crust. Oh. So you can see the little flakes that come off, cracker crust they call it, whatever. These little bits. It's mostly because of the curing and because of the low hydration of the dough. And also the topping combination. If you don't cure it and use a high hydration dough and use high moisture toppings, you're not going to get that. The more of those factors you can incorporate, the crisper the dough you're going to get. Moment of truth. That, to me, was a little bit too dark. Ideally, I would have pulled this 30 seconds earlier. However, I'm going to fucking eat it because I love it. You can see right through it. I can see the light right through this. Well, you guys can't, huh? You're on the other side of the camera. It's beautiful. Fucking beautiful pizza. Sausage, pepper, and onion, very common in the Chicago area. Actually, I think Illinois is the only state that sausage is the preferred topping. The rest of the country is like pepperoni and whatever else. I'll save my pepperoni speech for another day. It's fucking great. This is fucking great. I'm trying to think of some notes I can give. I always, every time I eat something or make something, first thing that goes through my head is what kind of notes do I have? Could I make this better? Is this good enough? I don't like when something's good enough, because then it's done. I was talking to Jimmy Bread, the guy I was talking about earlier. I went into his shop yesterday, we were talking. And I was telling them this is my original recipe I started with, and I just started because I knew the feel of dough, right? I didn't have a recipe to base off anything. I just started mixing things together. This isn't that recipe. That recipe, flopped, obviously. So it started from zero. But I saw it. I said, okay, this is a little wet. Whatever the problems are, adapted, made it again, made it again, made it again. So this is fully my recipe from start to finish. And I told them if I started this again, I would find something I like and base off of that, right? But when you're creative, I want it to be mine. And so this is that. This is mine. He looked at me and he said, "You really like the abuse, huh?" I said, "I guess I do. I kind of like some people like the thrill of the hunt. I like... You like to suffer," that's what he said. "You really like to suffer." And I want it... I need to make the mistakes to make a better product at the end. That's how I learn. That's not for everybody probably, but that is how I learn. And that is how I do things. I'm going to do something most people don't do in a live. Pull out the middle piece and you can see how structured this is. This is dangerous. If you're making pizza, this is dangerous, you know? But this is a centerpiece. You can see how this is loaded. This is a loaded fucking piece of pizza. And you can see how structured it is. Goddamn great. Normally I would like the peppers and the onions to dry out a little more and go a little more, but this works. The amount of cheese on it works. It just works together. And food is subjective. I don't like ranking stuff. I don't like saying something is perfect or whatever. It's subjective. Today I'm loving this right now. Tomorrow maybe I want it done a little bit more. I don't know. There's very little right and wrong with food. The way you want it, it's the right way. This, fucking great. Holy shit, alright, we've been on an hour and 15 minutes already. In the oven right now, we have, this is my cookbook release, or the cookbook I released today, the Chicago Pizza Cookbook. It's available on Amazon, my website, chicagojohnnies.com. You can download a PDF on my site, or you could order the paperback, Kindle, and hardcover versions from Amazon. So this is Uncle Pepper's Crispy Chicago Dough that's in the oven now, the one I just tried as well. And then I have dough left over for, I cured one of each of these crusts, and then I made 2 extra of the Uncle Peppers and 1 extra of the semolina whole wheat. I'm going to make this one next, and the reason I want to show you guys how to do it is because this is a little higher hydration. It's almost 54%. The other one is 44%, I believe. Yeah. So we're going to par bake this crust after we get it in the oven for a minute. Probably just a minute, maybe 2 minutes. You don't have to par bake this one. We'll see how thick it gets, I guess. Sometimes it's hard to roll this one out for whatever reason. And actually, I don't make this one so often, but I'm going to use semolina to roll it out. Usually I would use, all-purpose flour. But I got the semolina out. I don't do this often. I like to experiment. So why not? So you could see it's tackier. It's got a nicer sheen to it. It's wetter. That's the 10% hydration difference. You know, the other dough that we just rolled out was 10% less. So, this is actually my first time using semolina to roll this recipe out. I know it's very common out east, but not out east. I don't make this recipe too often, like I said, so. And I already know how the other one turns out. Maybe that's one of the things that gets kind of fucked up in my head, you know? If I've already done it, I don't know if I want to do it again. If I know how it's going to turn out, unless I'm cooking for somebody else. If I'm cooking for myself and I know how it's going to turn out, I'd like to adapt a little bit, you know? You see how much wetter and more pliable this dough is compared to the other one we rolled out? And that is from both the hydration, that extra 10% hydration, and also the flours. Whole wheat flour, semolina flour, doesn't have as much gluten structure. And that's also kind of why we get this shrinking, pullback, snapback. I don't know what the official term is. I call it snapback in my book. And this dough in particular will always do that. You start out with 12 inches and you end up with like 10 and a half, 11, something like that. Start in the center, roll out, and it looks like I'm rolling out here. I'm not. All I'm doing is moving the pin back, and then I'll start in the center and come back out again. Move the pin back, go out. Rotate it, same thing. But when I'm coming back in, I'm not actually pressing down until I get to the halfway point. Then I'll press down. So center out. Center out. Center out is. I don't know how many of you watched Silicon Valley. This is a different kind of center out than Silicon Valley, the show. There's a much more messed up version of center out. So with this one, I like to roll it, loosen it up, make sure it's dry, and then I like to let it sit for a minute before I dock it, because it's going to want to shrink back. If I dock it now and then I go to move it, I'm going to end up with a pretty small pizza. So this one I might end up trimming. Maybe not. Let's see. I don't think I have to trim this one. So this is what I would call rustic, where I'm not trimming the edges. I'm going to get the shape I get. You can see it's a little rougher here. That's where I tore the dough off earlier. This part here, totally fine. I love it. What's going to happen is these rough edges are actually going to give a different texture than the smooth edges and the rest of the dough. All I'm doing now is trying to make it a little round, round as I can. Shake off the extra flour. Round. Let it rest. Go check on this guy in the oven. I'm going to go about 30 seconds more. Some tea. Yeah, I did some cooking videos a long time ago. YouTube was, it's like 2009, 2010, some shit like that. I'm cooking, I always keep a rag in my back pocket, I wipe my face. I dropped the rag on the floor, I put it back in my pocket. Some jag-off comments about how you can't serve food like that, all this shit. I'm cooking for myself, like I give a shit. It's not like I was cooking for somebody else. I don't know why that just came into mind. Alright, let's see what we're at. Oh, yeah. This was the raw Uncle Pepper's crispy Chicago dough. The first one I made was the cured crust. So this is the same dough, except instead of rolling it out and leaving it exposed to the air for 4, 5, 6 hours, we just kept it in the container, let it proof, knocked it down, refrigerated it, took it out a few hours ago, knocked it down, and rolled it out, and we baked it right there. So this is 214 grams of dough, still very thin, but because I had that extra dough and the extra time in the oven, you could see, I mean, this is basically like a sheet of, cardboard or wood or whatever. Like it's a solid piece. This is a crispy fucking pizza. The fat content in this one, it almost seems, this is one thing I learned, one of the things I learned doing this, is you would think you want to keep adding fat, and you get crispier pizza. Which can be true depending on how you're baking it. What I found was somewhere around like 8, 9, 10, 12% of fat content for me is idyllic, and that's what we have here. The fat content, so all my recipes I tracked fat percentage, which this one was 7.14%. So for Chicago pizza, that's pretty low. For Neapolitan pizza, that's more than double. But for Chicago pizza, it's pretty low. So I track fat percentage, hydration percentage, but this one's very low percentage, 43.57%, and inclusive percentage. And the inclusive percentage I tracked, but I haven't found a consistency with it. Like, I don't know why, or maybe there isn't one. But I put it in the book in case maybe somebody out there can find, when you're at an inclusive percentage of 60%, consistently this happens. And that inclusive percentage could be from 20% fat, 40% hydration, or 40% fat, 40% hydration would be 80% inclusive. This one actually goes that high. This one's 86% inclusive. This is Rick Ricardo's deep dish. From what I can understand, the earliest known published deep dish recipe. And how do you do a Chicago Pizza Cookbook and not have that in there? So I did that. Kind of lost my train of thought here. I normally don't spend this much time by myself. So this is the book, the Chicago Pizza Cookbook, available on Amazon, Kindle. You can download a PDF version at chicagodaddies.com, or you can get a paperback version like this or hardcover on Amazon. All right, so I think we're good here. This is shrunk up about as much as it's probably going to shrink up. I'm not going to trim this one. I know we're at about 12 inches, so I'm totally fine with it. If you want to, you can trim yours. They're all consistent. I'm not a big plating guy. I just don't get it. I get it when I see it. I can't tactilely put it in a plate. Whatever that means. Getting a cardboard ready to cut this other pizza, and because I'm always learning, always adapting, I'm going to write down what the crust was and the toppings were, because when I go to eat it later or share it with somebody their notes, I want to incorporate it with the pizza that it was. So I want to know what pizza this is when I get notes up. So this is Uncle Pepper's raw dough, 214 grams. That's it, that's all I need to know in there. Alright, so we still have our peel from earlier. Yeah, it's still got breadcrumbs on it. I didn't clean it off. I'm okay with that. I know earlier I said try to use the flour content that's in the pizza on that thing, but totally fine with that. I don't want to waste that breadcrumbs. So, Uncle Pepper's crispy Chicago dough. This one didn't shrink as much as the semolina one that I showed you earlier. Like I said, for whatever reason, the whole wheat semolina one, no matter what I do, it will always get a good amount of shrink. This one did shrink, but not like that. Actually, I don't know if this one did shrink because I did not trim it. Can you fucking hear this? This is a pizza. So the cured one I was talking about, these little crumb bits that come off for the cured ones. If you do a really good low hydration dough, you will also get those little bits. All right. Now I'm holding this by the very edge of a piece, kind of like I guess like a roach clip or some shit, right? You can see the structure here. Part of the reason is bread flour. So because I was using this, I didn't age it as long as I normally would. I forgot to make some dough for this live. Instead of using Sarasota flour, I use bread flour, which is a little bit higher gluten content. And that's part of the reason. Some of the other reason is the appropriation of toppings and cheese. There's not a ridiculous amount. I mean, this is loaded. If there was a lot more on it, it wouldn't have this structure, I don't think. If there was a lot less on it, we wouldn't have been able to bake it as long. And I don't mind the darkness. A lot of people are going, oh, it's burnt. I don't mind this darkness because it's not counteracted with very pale color. So where I do mind it, like if this was mixed, you know. Anyway, this is sausage, pepper, and onion, Uncle Pepper's crispy Chicago dough recipe from the cookbook. Fucking beautiful. I'm gonna get the other pizza. So these are the same dough recipes. I'm shaking the dough on the peel. I got one more pizza going. Same exact dough recipes. This one is cured, thinner, rolled out thinner, cured. A little lighter on the cheese toppings. Toppings went on top of the pizza, which prevented the cheese from browning fully. Nothing wrong with it. You can see the color on this cheese is much better because the toppings are underneath the cheese, and because it was in the oven longer, because this was a raw dough when it went in. This one was a cured dough. You're very limited on the amount of time you could put a cured dough in the oven. This was like 8.5 minutes. I think the most I've done is probably 9.5, 10 minutes. And that's probably because the stone wasn't fully heated. Just some things to take notes of. If you are a presentation person, to me, this one looks much better than this one. But both fucking great. They're both great. And this is another, I don't like, these are very similar pieces, but they're different. And I don't think I prefer one over the other as far as eating them goes. So food is subjective. Cooking is subjective. I don't like the rankings. I'm not a fan. Not a fan of ranking food, okay? Alright, so this one here is our semolina whole wheat dough. A docket. This dough in particular, I dock the hell out of it because I feel like it prevents some of the shrinking and snapback in the oven. If you dock the shit out of it, it's less of that. It'll hold more of its form. I'm going to par bake this one because it is a touch thicker. Not thicker, it's a touch thick for just throwing it in raw. If you bake this off raw, no problem with that. It's not going to be as crisp. I want crisp, so I'm going to par bake it. just going to par bake it for 1 minute. And then, what are we going to do for toppings here? I don't need more prosciutto. I don't like garlic. Why don't we do this? I want something darker earthier. Let me see what I got in the fridge. There we go. We're sticking with salty pork with the bacon. The reason I'm picking the bacon over the sausage is because with this crust I want those dark, earthier flavors, and bacon is smoked, cured, darker, richer, deeper flavors than the sausage is going to be. So we're going to do tomato, sauteed spinach, and bacon. So we par bake this for 1 minute on the top stone. Beautiful, beautiful. Didn't shrink much. It might shrink a little more when we go through it in the second bake, but beautiful. I mentioned that I have some news to announce, and if you are just joining us, I am going to start a video podcast with guests, so it's not just me talking. I really miss cooking. The more my business, Chicago Johnny's, selling olive oil jardiniere and cherry bourbon barbecue sauce, both found at Jewel Osco. And then these other products as well, pizza seasoning, Italian beef gravy seasoning, sport peppers, sweet relish, has taken up a lot of time in the shipping and distribution aspect of the business. So I have a lot less, not even a lot less, I don't have time to go cater or sell food at festivals or run like a hot dog cart or beef cart like I had. So, to get me back in the kitchen, to see how I've grown over the years, I'm going to invite people that I know, people that I've met from doing stuff like this, over for dinner or late lunch, I don't know yet, and we'll converse, and I will cook for them, maybe give them some libations. Yeah, that's it. That's all I got to say. Pizza crust is par cooked. We have our crushed tomatoes. We have our Romano. And for this bacon, I'm going to put it underneath the cheese. And so that is up to you how you want to do that. This one in particular, I'm doing under the cheese because it is already pretty crisp. And if I put it on top of the cheese, it's going to be exposed to the hot air of the oven. And then it's going to keep crisping and crisping and crisping and eventually burn and dry out. Put it under the cheese. What's going to happen is it's going to absorb some of that, the moisture from the tomatoes, maybe even some of the fat from the cheese. Actually, who the fuck was talking last night? I was watching something. Throwing the fat. You want to know when to throw the fat. I forgot who was talking about it. But what cheese you use, how you grate the cheese, how thick you put the cheese, all of those have factors into when the fat's going to be expelled from the cheese. In this case, we're talking about bacon, but when it's going to throw the fat. If I put it underneath, it's going to take longer to render it out, which means it's going to render more of it out. Don't ask me how that works. And it's going to stay softer. It's going to become softer as it bakes. It's going to be underneath the cheese. If I put it on top, I'm going to have the pools of grease on top of the cheese. The bacon is going to dry out, and I'm going to be left with basically the saltiness. And I don't want that. Smokiness and saltiness. I want to keep it under the cheese so I get a nice, softer bacon and rendered fat. Throwing the fat. This is why I need a guest. I need somebody here who can get into my mind. You know what I think would be interesting about this podcast, or video podcast, whatever they call it, with guests. My mind's all kinds of racing, right? I always wonder what it would be like to be somebody else watching me be me. And so I think this is going to give me some insight into that. Like, what would it be like to be in my head as not me? I don't even know if that makes sense. We're going to add some mozzarella. So normally, a lot of these Chicago doughs, I like that provolone mozzarella mix. I didn't have provolone, for one thing, but in this particular combination, I think just the mozzarella is going to be better anyway, because it's just earthy. It's already a kind of a complex flavor profile. Obviously, textures, provolone cheese, deli provolone in particular, I'm talking about, has more of a pull or a bite to it, a resistance, I call it. And with this one, we already have the varying textures. We got the soft, we got the crunchy, we got the fats. And so with just all mozzarella with this combination, makes more sense to me, because I don't want that resistance. I don't want that pull. I've already got that in the crust. I've already got that in the spinach. Like spinach doesn't just break apart when you eat it, So perfect pizza seasoning I added to this. I'm going to do some spinach. The spinach was just sauteed in butter, Pinot Grigio, granulated garlic, and salt. And then I cook it down. And as it's cooking, the longer spinach cooks, the darker, the more seaweedy it looks, which can turn a lot of people off. So as it's cooking, once the moisture starts expelling and the spinach basically looks like this, where it's shrunk up, I take the spatula, I move it all to the side, move the pot away from the flame a little bit, so it's just on the edge, so it's basically just a liquid above the heat. And that's going to help to dry out, reduce a lot of that moisture, and then kill the heat, mix it all back together, and the spinach will absorb some of that liquid that was in there again. And then these are actually greenhouse tomatoes, I believe, unless they've changed their business model. Mighty Vine out of Chicago. And I got these at Jewel, they're on sale. Speaking of Jewel, they carry my olive oil jardiniere, and they carry my Midwestern cherry bourbon barbecue sauce. This is enough. This is a very wet ingredient, so this is enough. Sometimes I get lost in the creativity and I want to get more into it, Actually, for this one, what I'm going to do... I have some fontanella on hand, because I fucking love fontanella. And with this, the flavor mix I've got with the real dark, earthy, salty, fatty, I feel like a little bit more sharp. It's going to lend itself really well to this combination. Which normally, maybe with the raw garlic would have done that, that I was talking about earlier. If you've been listening for 3 hours. And so we don't have the raw garlic on here, we don't have this sharpness, so I'm gonna use some fontanella on top. And especially when it melts into this hydration from the tomatoes, and the fat mixes with the tomato, soft tomato, I think it's gonna be fucking great. I actually discovered fontanelle on accident. I was making saganaki, and this is before the internet. Well, not before the internet, before food and history of food and food blogs and all that shit. Before that blew up, I wanted to make saganaki. How do you make it? Or back then, how do you figure out how to make something? Ask somebody, right? What kind of cheese you use for saganaki? I don't know. What kind of cheese you use for saganaki? I don't know. So I went to the Italian market and I just started picking up all the cheeses that I hadn't had before. And fontanelle was one of them. At the time, I don't know if they still make them like this, but it was like a 6-inch wheel, maybe about an inch and a quarter thick, wrapped in black wax. So fucking good. They're so sharp. It melts. It's salty. You don't need a ton of it. And especially on the top here, like I said, I think with the moisture coming out of the spinach and the tomatoes, it's going to mix with this salty, fatty combination, and it's going to be fucking gorgeous. Let's get it in the oven. Starting the timer at 10 minutes. Probably going to need 2 to 4 more minutes, but at 10 minutes I can check it and see if I want to move it to the top stone I was talking about earlier. So the live I'm doing today is to promote the Chicago Pizza Cookbook, available on Amazon, chicagojohnnies.com. Book I wrote. This is a combination of about 10 to 12 years of notes making recipes. This is actually the original recipe, adapted over years, obviously. Uncle Pepper's Crispy Chicago Dough. That's 2 of the ones we already made, the sausage, pepper, onion. One we did a cured crust, one we did raw. And then the other recipe, which is in the oven now, is semolina whole wheat flour. Now this is a very dark and earthy crust. Still comes out real crisp. We did a cured crust earlier, now we're doing the regular one. It's a little higher hydration, so it's easier to roll out. It's a little easier to manipulate and play with if you're new to making pizza. But because of the higher hydration, and I rolled it kind of thick, I was probably at, if I had to guess, I'd say 240 grams, where I'd want to be at like 220, 215 of dough for a 12-inch. It was a little thicker than I wanted it to be, so I par-baked it for 1 minute on the top stone. Other recipes that are in here are the egg yolk pizza dough, which gives a very rich flavor. Barbecue chicken, bacon fontanella, or fontina shallot pizza. Very controversial. You do barbecue sauce on pizza. You get people telling me it's not pizza and shit like that. It's common out here. Everybody's got a barbecue pizza with some kind of variation on it. And though I don't like ranking places and foods and stuff like that, consistently across the board, pizza places lack on seasoning the chicken that they're putting on these pizzas. Because a lot of the barbecue have chicken, which is great for texture, but chicken gets lost with everything happening here. So you need to season the shit out of it, and nobody's doing that. For this one, I caramelized some shallots, and then topped it with fresh green onion after I baked it. The fontina mixed with mozzarella is a nice texture, but also a little bit of sharpness, almost like a I don't know how to describe this, mid-European sharpness of cheese, where it's like creamy and sharp, Danish, I guess. Like it's not like Romano, which is pungent. It's like a softer sharpness. That's what the fontina does for this pizza. And then I brushed the crust with my cherry bourbon barbecue sauce, which you can get at Jewel. The shallots cooked down in some wine and some butter. Once they start to turn translucent. The chicken, season the chicken. I put the chicken under the cheese, and that can go either way depending on where you're getting the pizza from, under or above for the chicken. I want it under because I want this crust is crisp. So I already have, and the green onion is crisp. I already have the crisp texture. So with the chicken, I don't need it to like dry out and be jerky like. I don't want all that resistance. So I put the chicken under the cheese, please. Controversial Hawaiian pizza. I don't know why this is so controversial, because It's a play on an Italian-American dish with thin crust pizza. Or pizza, I guess, in general, the way we eat it with a lot of cheese. Made by a Greek guy living in Canada based off of Chinese food. Sweet and sour chicken. So, sweet and salty. Sweet, sour, and salty. I don't know. If you like it, great. If you don't, great. Don't do it. This is a very enhanced version of it. You kind of caramelize the pineapple before you put it on here. You pickle the onions, which sometimes you have onions, sometimes you don't, but quick pickle the red onions. Awesome in here. And then the ham, a little bit of brown sugar on the ham. Throw it in the oven for a little while, let it caramelize on there. So you get a lot of different textures with this. The ham, how do I describe this? It's kind of jerky-like. The pineapple is kind of candied, so it's got like the stringiness to it, a little bit of the candied pineapple texture. It's fucking awesome. What we got? Dessert pizza, hazelnut, banana, and almond. Oh, and then so this is my journey of Chicago pizza, right? The Chicago Pizza Cookbook, the way I made it, the way I developed it, the way I wanted to run it. I wanted to put a section at the back of the book for the future of Chicago pizza. And Mr. Anthony Scardino, he owns Professor Pizza in Old Town. I wanted to pay homage. So, and ironically, we met in Vegas. The trip to Vegas I was talking about. We went into a place called Pizza Rock by Tony Gimignani. I don't even know if that's how you pronounce his fucking name. But we were there. We got a Sicilian. We got a New York. You know what else we got? He happened to be there working because the pizza convention was going on in Vegas. I go on 3 vacations my whole life. I'm in Vegas, and somebody goes, "Johnny, Chicago Johnny's? What the fuck?" Turn around and say, I never met him before this. It's like, yeah, how the fuck do you know that, right? His uncle owned a beef joint just over the border of Wisconsin, and he used my jardiniere. And so Anthony learned about my jardiniere from his uncle over the border of Wisconsin, and we met in Vegas by circumstance. One of probably 3 times I've traveled, more than 4 hours away from home. So that was kind of ironic. Anyway, so we met then. I asked him if he wanted to contribute. He gave me his grandma pizza recipe. And it's in here as well. And I think it's always important to look at where we are, where we've been, and where we're going. And Anthony took a fairly basic recipe style, or like pizza, and made it fantastic, right? Very elevated. You can see he's got the whipped ricotta on there. He does. He's big into the like pepperoni, hot honey type combinations. I actually made this for Michelle's birthday a few weeks ago. It was my first time doing ricotta on pizza. What's that? But this is not like a Chicago. I said, don't. I'm doing the Chicago stuff. Give me what you want, but so I'm already doing much Chicago shit. So he gave me the grandma pizza recipe, which is done in a pan. It's more Sicilian style. It's spongy. It's got a crisp outside, a softer interior with a nice crumb in it. I don't know if there's any cut pieces. There's no cut pieces. But anyway, so Anthony Scardino, he's in Chicago. I think he's got 2 places now. Professor Pizza is his company. And he's doing fucking great work. And then there's some stories in here, me, my history, whatnot. This is a picture of us working the Crescent City Cajun, which was a Cajun food tent that I ran out in McHenry County area, mostly Lake County. For 5 years or so, we did jambalaya, crawfish etouffee, gumbo. We did dirty rice sometimes, red beans and rice, voodoo chicken sandwiches. It was fun. I do miss it. And this is a hot dog cart I ran for about 2 years, trying to promote the jardiniere being in Jewel stores and whatnot. So you go to Jewel, you can get my olive oil jardiniere, you can get my cherry bourbon barbecue sauce, and hopefully in the future you can get some other products. And then this is my dad's dad and my mom's dad. Very different people, but both did things the way they wanted to do them. And this is a picture of each of them flipping the camera off in their own way. I feel like I get a little bit of that do it my way kind of attitude. You know, like it's, you get one spin on this earth, do it the way you want to do it. And I think that comes from both of those things. So, we got a pizza coming out in the oven here, probably 3 or 4 minutes. I'm going to turn it here in a minute. Go on Amazon or ChicagoJohnnies.com, the Chicago Pizza Cookbook. Look for Uncle Pepper's Growing Peppers. It's going to be called Growing Peppers video podcast. I'm going to have guests and cook for them and just basically shoot the shit, see how I've grown over the years or haven't grown, or what their view on my journey is. Like I said earlier, I'm so curious as to what it's like to be somebody else, like get in my head as somebody else, because there's a lot of weird shit happening up there, you know? It's just wild. So let me turn this pizza. I'll let my dog out real quick. I will be right back. So we have that other pizza coming out. It is the semolina whole wheat. This is one of the most commonly requested recipes. A cornmeal crust recipe, which not like everywhere, you know, the cornmeal is very few places, but it is here. So it took me a while to figure out the proper timing and combination of a cornmeal crust. This is also a crust I would not do the same day. The longer you can let it sit and have that cornmeal absorb the hydration, the better. If you're not going to let it sit for 4 or 5 days, use a fine or medium cornmeal. If you're going to let it sit a real long time, you can do coarse cornmeal, you get a different texture. Coarse cornmeal is kind of the stuff you put underneath the pizza. What else I got in here? Oh, tomatoes. Like I mentioned earlier, if you're going to put money into something, put it in the tomatoes. Like, if you're going to pick one thing, get really nice, bright, fresh tomatoes, not so acidic, not so salty, not so cooked down. One of the best ones is the Stanislaus brown tomatoes. I mean, the picture probably doesn't do justice, but this might be the best one I found. One of the better ones, I guess. I don't like ranking shit, like I said. Tomatoes. Put the money in tomatoes. Oh, yeah. So, I probably should have pulled that out to show you a minute ago. Look at that. That is stiff. So before, 2 minutes ago when the oven went off, it was 10 minutes in. And the reason I put 10 minutes on is I wanted to look at it. It's on the bottom stone of the oven. It's a lot of wet happening on this pizza, with the spinach and the tomatoes. There's a good amount of cheese on it. The crust is a high hydration crust. Oh yeah, this is gonna be fucking great. Oh my god, is this the one I put black garlic on? It is. So we have some black garlic powder, spinach that I sauteed in Pinot Grigio, butter, salt, granulated garlic, thin sliced tomatoes from Mighty Vine Tomatoes, and mozzarella cheese. You can see the browning on here. Even with all the wet ingredients, you can see some of this browning. It's probably from the fontanella that I used. You can smell that. So anyway, before I put it on the top rack, it looked more like that sausage pepper onion pizza with the sausage underneath, the cheese, and the onion and pepper on top. So at 10 minutes, it looked a little bit more like this. Paler cheese, not as melted, stuff like that. Moving it up to the top stone for the last 2 minutes, and usually it'll only be like a minute, but since it's a wet dough, 2 minutes is good. A wetter dough. But moving it up to the top stone for the final 2 minutes, you can see the tomatoes expelled a lot of their moisture. The spinach, there's not pools of liquid. Well, let's cut this fucker, right? Oh, you know what? I used the wrong cardboard. That's okay. I'll write new stuff on it. This is semolina. Black garlic. Harvey. Always keep notes. I spent way too many fucking years look at that. Not keeping notes. And then I'm like, wow, that was fucking great. What did I do? I'll remember. And you never remember. You never fucking remember. Because you're making 30 things a week. You don't remember. So just keep notes. Keep notes. That's part of the reason I didn't gloss the pages in the cookbook. I want you to write it, and I want you to make it your own. You think this is too wet, too dry, not salty enough? Change it. Make it the way you want it. That is what cooking is all about. Now don't get me wrong, if I'm cooking for somebody else, I do cater to their needs, because it's one of the things that is pretty universal in cooking. Almost like comedians always go for the laugh, right? Like, comedians always want to go for the laugh, do what it takes to get the laugh. Cooking, I want you to have a good experience. That's my end game. You know, I could make the best pizza I've ever had. You might fucking hate it. I don't want you to hate it. I want you to have a good experience. So that's what it is with cooking. And I think that's part of the similarity between, which actually Jimmy Bread, when I was talking to him yesterday, him and I were talking, we like watching comedians. We like watching people cook. Cooking made sense to us. Why do we both like comedians? I said, I think there's something similar in building a joke and building a dish. Like, it is, you're starting with zero. Maybe you know the outcome that you want, but you have to get there. And I have to get you there, right? Like the comedians do. They have to get you to the punchline. Cooks get you to the end result, right? I want you to enjoy this. I want you to have a good time eating it. One last all-around plug. Perfect Pizza Seasoning is on all these pizzas. It's on Amazon, Walmart, my site, ChicagoJohnnies.com. If you're local to the Chicago area, go to Jewel. You can get my olive oil jardiniere and my cherry bourbon barbecue sauce. The Chicago Pizza Cookbook release. Today is the official release date. You can get a paperback, hardcover, Kindle version on Amazon, or you can download a PDF version and print it at home on my site, ChicagoJohnnies.com. And then look for a video podcast called Growing Peppers. And it's going to be a journey and an exploration of myself through other people's eyes. Thank you all for joining me. This here is the semolina whole wheat flour crust, and as promised, crispy as fuck. Look at this structure here. Look at the color on that. Look at how loaded this is. You see this shit? This is fucking ridiculous. Oh my god. I forgot I put bacon on this. The bacon with the fontanella is a combination I don't know if I've had before making pizzas. There's something godlike about that. I don't know how to describe that. You get like that almost seaweed flavor of the spinach. You get that fresh garden tomato. You get that smoky, unctuous, salty, fatty bacon. And you get that sharp, salty fontanella on the whole wheat semolina crust. God damn. I don't know if I could describe this. Or did I even do it justice? I might put a recipe for this up somewhere. Anyway, get the Chicago Pizza Cookbook on Amazon or my website, chicagojohnnies.com. Go to Jewel, pick up my giardiniera, pick up my barbecue sauce. Go on Amazon or Walmart or my site to pick up the Chicago Johnny's Perfect Pizza Seasoning. And look for Growing Peppers, the video cooking podcast featuring me and random people. Look out.